Sorry, I didn't see you there. Well, if you are currently watching this video, then you are probably one of the one of the many people who was really anticipating me talking about the second volume of the manga series Attack on Titan. So that's what I'm going to be doing now. Just a heads up for people who are just looking at this video now and haven't seen my me talking about the first volume of this series, you'll definitely want to stop this video and go watch that one first, because a lot of the events that happen in the first volume affect the events that happen in here. Excuse me. So yeah, but if you did see that video, or if you've read the first chapter yourself and just want my opinion on the second one, then I hope you're satisfied by this. So let's get started. Now, since our main character Eren Yeager is at this point in the story MIA, the second volume takes a little bit of time to talk more about the side characters. They become more of the primary focus of the volume, which I really like. If you saw my first part of this, you'll know that I felt like the first volume didn't really have much time to focus on those characters, because the side characters that we did get some conversation out of all ended up, of course, dying near the end. So the fact that the entire chapter, or volume I should say, is focused on on the side characters, I think it's a bit of a breath of fresh air. Now, when I say that it begins to it focuses more on the side characters, I really mean two primary characters. The first character that gets a lot of development, I should say, is of course the one you see on the cover here, Eren's adopted sister, Mikasa Ackerman. And this volume actually gives us her backstory, how she used to have a family of her own, but unfortunately both of her parents were murdered, and she was going to be captured and sold off. But eventually, of course, Eren and his father came. They took care of the kidnappers, or more so, Eren takes care of them, and eventually the three of them reunite, and Mikasa becomes part of their family. And it is a pretty good backstory. Of course, it's very tragic and sad for someone to have that happen to them, and it pretty much gives us a reason as to why she does what she does. She's very good at being a soldier, and she pretty much thinks that no matter what circumstances you are in this world, you pretty much have to fight in order to survive, because if you don't, you're kinda gonna die. The second character who gets some major development is a character that we saw a little bit in the first volume and got a bit of characterization out of. I guess that's a good enough picture, I would say. Jon Kirstein, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name, who in the first volume pretty much acted like the snotty kind of character who only really cares about helping himself, and of course his entire goal of joining the military was becoming part of the military police brigade, who are the characters that guard the innermost wall and pretty much have don't really go through the same types of events that characters in the more outer walls would go through. And of course, that made him that made him into a sort of a sort of rival character for Eren. But here, because they haven't none of the soldiers have chosen their branch yet, they of course have to deal with the events in the outer walls. And of course, many Titans are around, lots of people are dying, and he somewhat feels responsible for this because during these events, the innermost castle area that has all the supplies that they need, all the extra blades and gas that they can use. They're all inside this castle, but of course it is being surrounded by Titans, and all the characters except for Mikasa feel like there's no way they can get in there with the supplies that they have right now, which are slim to none. But Mikasa says that she doesn't care. She thinks that she's stronger than anyone in that entire group, and goes on and heads on alone. But of course, John decides to follow her, and thus all the other soldiers decide to follow him. And as a result of this, he sort of feels like he's responsible for the death of many of the soldiers who went with them. And that sort of gives him this idea that, you know, these people are struggling, and, you know, they're trying to fight to survive. But at the beginning, all he cared about was saving himself, which does definitely affect his character as the volumes continue on, and he becomes he's probably the most developed out of all the side characters that isn't Armin, Eren, or Mikasa. So, yeah, the fact that two characters that are, I guess, who aren't Eren, the fact that they get some time to shine is really nice, and I really like this volume 4. But if I can complain about a few things, a lot of the first thing that I would probably talk about, well, before that, I want to discuss a bit of the overall sort of, I guess you could say, art direction in a couple places. Of course, you got the stuff that I talked about in the first volume, where some of the pictures look like they were made digitally on a computer rather than being hand-drawn, like any of the other pages are. But there are also some times where a lot of the drawings of the characters can look a sort of just odd. There were two specific parts that I was thinking about. One of them was right around where we first encounter the what's called the Berserker Titan, for the reason that this is a Titan that is actually helping the fellow soldiers that are trying to get into the main castle area. And for this one picture here, it looks like his neck is like way larger compared to his head, and that just looks weird. It kind of reminds me of the 2014 Godzilla design, where they made his neck like much fatter compared to his head. And the other part that I actually just found was our character John, where it looks like his head was made way too large, and as a result, he looks like he has very little hair. That that little part right there, that looked sort of weird to me. And I feel like this is just like a sort of like personal preference, but it kind of makes me feel sort of uncomfortable reading it when some characters have like this huge like image dedicated to them, and they're like staring straight at you. One of the areas is right here, where Mikasa is trying to encourage Armin to continue on, even after Eren becomes missing in action. That little like image of her just felt weird to me as I was looking at it. And the other one was of the Berserker Titan again, where he destroyed all of the Titans that were blocking the castle, and of course he lets out a huge screech. That image right there also sort of bothered me. I'm not sure if that's just me and my personal preference when I'm looking at a picture or watching like a TV show or a movie. Like when characters look straight at the camera, it just feels kind of awkward looking at it. So aside from that, one of the other problems that I sort of have with the volume, and I guess this sort of can go for the overall like series in general, is that a lot of the dialogue feels very repetitive. A majority of the dialogue is talking about how, you know, this world is like so cruel. There's like all the humans are hiding in this one small space, and they're constantly being eaten over and over, and all the characters are feeling like, you know, we can't solve this. This is the end for all of us. And that sort of dialogue, that kind of dialogue gets repeated quite oftenly in this volume that I realized as I was reading it, and it felt like it needed like some sort of like thing to stick out from the rest. And there are a couple of times where the side characters, two in particular, and if you've seen the series, you know what two characters I'm talking about, where they sort of like, they're just sort of characters that kind of stick out, and I feel like their dialogue sort of really gives it a bit more fresh air to breathe when all the other characters are pretty much talking about how everything sucks in this world. But aside from those two things, the volume itself, I really do like. Whether there are some times where I sort of like enjoyed this more than the first volume, because it gave us time with characters that we didn't really get all that much of in the first volume. But, you know, the story is still engaging. Mikasa's backstory is tragic and gets you more and more interested in the character. And of course, the art direction's good. The mystery of what the Berserker Titan is and why it's helping the humans is very interesting. Even though it's sort of brought up near the end of the volume, it's still pretty good. And the overall twist for those like 3 people in the world who don't know it yet, it is definitely a twist that you probably didn't really expect. I didn't. Coming from me, who, when I first heard of the series, I was surprised at that too. But again, I really did enjoy